My wife's boss broke into our home and claimed it as his after she secretly sold it to him. He humiliated me in front of my own door while she stood by him and ordered me to leave. The first sound wasn't the splintering of wood. It was the sharp, percussive crack of the door jamb giving way, a sound like a bone snapping. It ripped through the quiet Sunday afternoon quiet of my home, a place that, until that precise second, I had considered a sanctuary. I was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and reading the paper, the scent of fresh-cut grass from the lawn I'd just mowed still hanging in the air. Then came the explosion of noise, the shudder that ran through the floorboards, and I was on my feet, my heart lurching into my throat. I ran into the foyer to see my front door hanging drunkenly on one hinge, a gaping wound in the side of my house. And framed in that wound stood a man I knew only from photographs and company newsletters. Marcus Thorne. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my car. His silver hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and predatory confidence. He was the founder and CEO of Thorne and Associates, the architectural behemoth where my wife, Jessica, was a rising star. And he was standing in my ruined doorway as if he owned the place. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled, my voice a raw mix of shock and adrenaline. "I'm calling the police." Marcus Thorne didn't even flinch. He simply stepped over the threshold, his expensive Italian shoes crunching on the debris. He looked around my living room, at the photos of Jessica and me on the mantelpiece, at the worn armchair where I read to our son when he was little, with a look of profound, dismissive boredom. "Save your breath, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that oozed authority. "The police won't be necessary. This is a simple matter of a property owner inspecting his assets." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the sheer audacity. "Your assets? This is my house. You just broke down my door. That's breaking and entering." He smiled then, a thin, cruel smile that didn't reach his cold, gray eyes. "It's not breaking and entering if you own the property. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, this house, the land it sits on, and everything in it, belongs to me." Before I could form a response, before I could even wrap my head around the insanity of his words, Jessica appeared. She didn't come from upstairs. She walked in from behind Marcus, stepping gracefully through the ruined doorway. She wasn't dressed for a lazy Sunday at home. She was wearing a chic, tailored dress, her hair and makeup perfect. She looked like she was heading to a board meeting, not witnessing a home invasion. She walked to Marcus's side and placed a hand on his arm. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the shattered door. She just looked at him, her expression a mixture of deference and something else, something that looked terrifyingly like adoration. "Is there a problem, darling?" Marcus asked her, his voice softening, a grotesque parody of affection. "No problem at all, Marcus," she said, her voice smooth as silk. She finally turned her gaze on me, and her eyes were completely empty of the love, the history, the 15 years we had shared. They were the eyes of a stranger. "Leo, Marcus is right. The house is his. You need to leave." The world tilted on its axis. My wife, my Jessica, standing next to this man, telling me to leave our home. "Jess, what is this?" I pleaded, my voice cracking. "What's going on? Is he threatening you?" Marcus let out a short, contemptuous laugh. "Threatening her? Mr. Miller, you still don't get it, do you? Your wife is a woman of ambition, of vision. She understands that loyalty is a commodity, and hers belongs to the winning side. She's been on my side for a very long time." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. He let it flutter onto the coffee table. "There's the deed. Signed, sealed, and legally filed. Your name is no longer on it." Her name was, and she signed her half over to me in exchange for other considerations. I looked from the paper to Jessica's face, searching for any sign of doubt, of coercion, of regret. There was nothing, just a cool, placid calm. The pieces started to click into place, forming a picture so monstrous I could barely look at it. The late nights, the weekend retreats, the way she had been handling all our finances for the last year, insisting it was easier for her since her income was higher. She hadn't been managing our life. She had been liquidating it. She had been selling me out, piece by piece, to this man. You sold our house to him." I whispered, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "I made a strategic asset transfer," she corrected, her voice chillingly corporate. This house was holding us back, Leo. It was your dream, not mine. My dreams are bigger. She looked at Marcus. Our dreams are bigger. Two large, thuggish-looking men in black suits suddenly appeared in the doorway behind them. They were Marcus's security detail, his personal enforcers. "I'll sue you," I said, my voice trembling with a rage that was finally starting to burn through the shock. "I'll sue you for everything. For fraud, for conspiracy, for illegal eviction." Marcus just smiled that dead-eyed smile again. He picked up another document from the table, one I hadn't noticed before. "I don't think you will. You see, this is an affidavit, signed by your wife, detailing a long history of your supposed financial mismanagement and emotional instability. It paints a rather compelling picture of a man who drove his own family into ruin, forcing his wife to take drastic measures to salvage what she could. It's her word against yours. And who do you think a judge will believe? The rising star architect, or the sad, little man who lost his house?" He nodded to his men. "Escort Mr. Miller off the premises. He's allowed to take his wallet and the clothes on his back. Nothing else." I didn't even have a chance to react. The two men grabbed my arms in a grip of iron. They were professionals. They dragged me towards the broken door, my feet scuffing on the floor of the home I had built, the life I had loved. As they hauled me through the doorway, I looked back one last time. Jessica was straightening Marcus Thorne's tie, her fingers moving with a practiced intimacy. She didn't give me a second glance. They threw me onto my own lawn, the grass I had just cut, and I landed hard. The front door, the one I had installed myself, was closed in my face. The lock clicked shut. I was homeless, penniless, and utterly destroyed. Standing on the manicured lawn of a life that had just been stolen from me, a cold, dark resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. They thought this was the end. They thought they had won. They thought I was a sad little man. They had no idea that you can't truly destroy a man who has nothing left to lose. Because a man with nothing is the freest and most dangerous man in the world. And I would spend every waking moment of the rest of my life dismantling theirs, brick by stolen brick. I sat on the curb for what felt like hours, watching my life get erased. A high-end moving company, clearly prearranged, pulled up. Men in crisp uniforms started carrying out boxes. Not my boxes. Theirs. They were moving in. My personal belongings, my books, my clothes, my father's old watch, every tangible piece of my identity, were likely already in a dumpster somewhere. The humiliation was a physical thing, a burning fire in my chest. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, their faces a mixture of curiosity and pity. I was a spectacle, the man who got thrown out of his own house, the cuckold, the fool. Finally, a flicker of survival instinct cut through the fog of shock. I pulled out my phone, my bank account. I logged in, my hands shaking. The balance was $47.31. She had drained it. All of it. The joint savings, the checking account, everything. She'd left me with just enough for a cheap meal. It was a final, deliberate act of cruelty. A parting gift. I had no one to call. My parents were gone. My only brother lived across the country, and we hadn't been close in years. My friends were our friends, couples we'd socialized with, people who admired Jessica and tolerated me. Who would they believe? The successful, charming architect, or the jobless, homeless man babbling about a conspiracy? I had one option. A name from a past I thought I'd left behind. His name was Jack. We'd grown up together in the rougher part of the city, and while I'd gone to college and tried to build a respectable life, Jack had taken a different path. He was a private investigator, a guy who operated in the gray areas, who knew how to find things people didn't want found. We hadn't spoken in a decade, but his number was still saved in my phone under emergency. This qualified. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and questionable stains on the carpet. I paid for one night with the last of my cash. Sitting on the lumpy bed in that grimy, anonymous room, I made the call. Jack's Investigations, a gruff voice answered. "Jack? It's Leo Miller." There was a pause. "Leo? Holy hell. Last I heard, you were living the suburban dream. Don't tell me you need a PI. I need more than a PI, Jack," I said, my voice raw. "I need a goddamn ghost. I need to disappear, and I need to learn how to haunt someone." I told him everything. The whole sordid, insane story. He was silent for a long time after I finished. I expected him to laugh, to tell me I was crazy. "Thorne," he said finally, his voice low and serious. Marcus Thorne. Yeah, I know the name. The man's a shark that swallowed the whole ocean. He's got judges in his pocket and half the city council on his payroll. You're not just picking a fight, Leo. You're declaring war on a king in his own kingdom. I know, I said. That's why I called you. This is going to be expensive, he warned. I have nothing, Jack. They took it all. Another pause. I'll tell you what, he said, and I could hear the old loyalty in his voice, the bond forged in a tough neighborhood years ago. You work for me. You've got a good head for numbers, right? I've got stacks of messy financial cases I can't make heads or tails of. You help me clean up my books, be my in-house forensic guy, and I'll help you with your problem. We'll call it a barter. But you gotta understand, Leo. This isn't about getting your house back. This is about scorched earth. Are you prepared for that? The earth is already scorched, Jack, I said. I'm just here to solve it. And so my new life began. I moved into a small, windowless back room at Jack's dingy office. My bed was a cot, my desk a folding table. I spent my days untangling the messy financial lives of cheating spouses and embezzling business partners, my nights dedicated to a single, all-consuming project, the complete and utter annihilation of Marcus Thorne and Jessica Miller. Jack was my guide into the shadows. He taught me the craft of surveillance, how to be invisible, how to tail a car without being seen, how to use long-lens cameras, listening devices, GPS trackers. I was a quick study. The meticulous, detail-oriented nature that made me a good accountant also made me a natural at this. Every detail mattered. Every receipt, every credit card statement, every overheard conversation was a piece of the puzzle. My first target was their routine. I needed to map out their new life, the one they had built on the ruins of mine. Jack helped me get a cheap, untraceable car and a set of new identities. I became David, a freelance writer who frequented coffee shops near the Thorne and Associates headquarters. I became Paul, a gym enthusiast who joined the same high-end fitness club Marcus attended. I watched them, and I learned. They were disgustingly, publicly happy. They held hands walking down the street. They had long, leisurely lunches at expensive restaurants. They were living the life of a power couple, a life Jessica had clearly craved. She had seamlessly slotted into the role of the CEO's partner, attending functions, hosting dinners at my house, wearing new, expensive clothes. She was thriving in her betrayal. I documented everything. I took thousands of photos. I recorded snippets of their conversations using a directional microphone from the back of my van. The more I gathered, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a recent affair. This had been going on for years. The plan to take my house, to erase me, had been a long-term strategy. I found evidence that Jessica had been systematically undervaluing my contributions to our joint assets, secretly leveraging our home, and moving money into accounts Marcus controlled, all under the guise of smart financial planning. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had methodically dismantled my life from the inside out, with me smiling and thanking her for her help. The depth of the deception was breathtaking. It fueled the cold fire inside me. But photos of an affair weren't enough. Humiliating them wasn't enough. I needed to hit Marcus where he was truly vulnerable. His business. His empire was his identity. To destroy the man, I had to destroy his creation. I went back to the financial statements I had glanced at before my life imploded. Now, with a singular focus and Jack's resources, I dug deeper. I spent weeks, months, cross-referencing public records with data purchased from shadowy information brokers Jack knew. I built a detailed map of Thorne's corporate structure. It was a labyrinth of shell companies, holding companies, and offshore accounts, designed to hide money, evade taxes, and bribe officials. The key, I realized, was a massive redevelopment project Thorne was pushing through the city council. The Riverfront Gateway project. It was billed as a triumph of urban renewal, but I suspected it was a land grab, greased with backroom deals and illegal payoffs. If I could prove that, I could unravel his entire enterprise. I needed an inside source. I needed someone on the city council, someone who might have been approached by Thorne, someone with a conscience. Jack's research pointed me to one person, Councilwoman Maria Flores. She was a young, idealistic first-termer, a crusader against corruption who was a constant thorn in the side of the city's old guard political machine. She was also the swing vote on the zoning committee for the Riverfront project. Getting to her was the next challenge. I couldn't approach her directly. I needed a way in. And Jessica, in her arrogance, gave it to me. Jessica, in her new role as the de facto First Lady of Thorne and Associates, had taken up philanthropy. Her chosen cause was a charity gala for inner-city arts programs, and the guest of honor, the keynote speaker, was none other than Councilwoman Maria Flores. It was the perfect opportunity. I wouldn't attend as myself, of course. I would attend as someone else entirely. Jack worked his magic. He created a flawless new identity for me. Alex Renner, a wealthy, low-profile venture capitalist from San Francisco with an interest in philanthropic investment. He procured a custom-tailored suit, a backstory, and a hefty donation to the charity that secured me a seat at a VIP table. The night of the gala, I looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back wasn't Leo Miller, the defeated husband. It was Alex Renner, a man of quiet confidence and hidden purpose. The transformation was more than just the suit. It was in the set of my jaw, the cold clarity in my eyes. I was a predator wearing the skin of a philanthropist. I found Maria Flores during the cocktail hour. She was surrounded by the usual sycophants, but I saw the weariness in her eyes. I waited for a moment when the crowd around her thinned, and then I approached. "Councilwoman Flores," I said, extending a hand. "Alex Renner, it's an honor. Your work on behalf of the city is truly inspiring." "Thank you, Mr. Renner," she said, her handshake firm. "Please, call me Alex." I was hoping I might have a brief word. My firm is looking to invest in cities with a commitment to transparent and ethical development. Your name came up repeatedly as a champion of those values. Her interest was piqued. "I'm always happy to talk about bringing ethical business to our city." I lowered my voice slightly. That's why I was so concerned when I heard about some of the backroom pressure being applied around the Riverfront Gateway project. It seems like a classic case of a powerful developer trying to bypass the very transparency you champion. Her eyes narrowed. I had hit a nerve. "What have you heard, Mr. Renner?" "I've heard that Marcus Thorne is not a man who takes no for an answer. I've heard that he makes generous offers to those who can help him, and that he finds ways to punish those who can't." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. I believe a man like that is not just a threat to a single project, but to the integrity of the entire city. And I believe he needs to be stopped. I saw a flicker of understanding, of recognition in her expression. She knew exactly what I was talking about. She had been on the receiving end of Thorne's pressure. "My interest is purely in ethical investment, of course," I added smoothly. "If a developer of Thorne's reputation is set to dominate the city's future, my firm would be forced to look elsewhere. But if an anonymous source were to provide me with concrete evidence of his corrupt practices, I have the resources and the connections to ensure that evidence reaches the right federal investigators, completely bypassing the compromised local channels. It would be a great service to the city and to ethical business everywhere." I had laid the bait. I was offering her a way to fight back, a way to take down a corrupt titan without getting her own hands dirty. She looked at me for a long, searching moment. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Alex," she said, her voice neutral. But as she turned to walk away, she subtly palmed a small, folded napkin into my hand. I waited until I was in the restroom to open it. On it was written a time and a place for a meeting the next day. No name, no signature. The Queen had just entered the game. The King was about to be checked. The meeting with Councilwoman Flores took place in a noisy, crowded park, the kind of place where you can be anonymous in plain sight. She was disguised in a baseball cap and sunglasses, a far cry from the polished politician at the gala. "I don't know who you really are, Alex," she began without preamble. "And frankly, I don't want to know. But you were right. Thorne has been applying immense pressure. Not just offers of campaign contributions, but veiled threats. He knows where my kids go to school. He mentioned how much my husband enjoys his job at his law firm, a firm that happens to do a lot of business with Thorne's associates." The man's depravity knew no bounds. He wasn't just a corporate shark. He was a gangster in a suit. "I can't go to the DA," she continued. "He's in Thorne's pocket. The whole system is compromised. But I have something." A junior staffer in the planning department felt guilty. He was ordered by his boss to lose a damning environmental impact report on the riverfront site, a report that shows the land is contaminated and would cost a fortune to clean up, a cost Thorne is trying to push onto the city. The staffer made a copy before he shredded the original. She slid a manila envelope across the park bench. "This is that copy. It proves Thorne and the planning commissioner are conspiring to commit fraud against the city. It's the thread. If you pull it, his whole sweater will unravel. This is a start, I said, taking the envelope. But it's not enough. We need to connect the fraud directly to Thorne's money. We need to prove the bribery. I can't help you with that, she said, shaking her head. The money trail is a black box. But it wasn't a black box to me. I was an accountant, and I had a secret weapon, Jessica. Her arrogance was about to become my greatest asset. Back at Jack's office, I dove into the new evidence. The suppressed environmental report was damning. It was the linchpin. Now, I just had to connect it to a payoff. I went back to the mountain of financial data I had on Thorne, looking for a payment to the planning commissioner, a man named Gerald Finney. There was nothing direct, of course. Thorne was too smart for that. The payment would be hidden, laundered. I started looking at Jessica's cloned phone data again. She was now fully integrated into Thorne's life, which meant she was privy to his business. She texted and emailed with his personal bankers, his lawyers, his inner circle. She was arrogant, sloppy, and desperate to prove her worth, her new status. She loved to talk. I spent days sifting through thousands of messages, looking for a keyword, a name, a number. And then I found it. A single, cryptic email from Jessica to Thorne's personal wealth manager. The subject was Garden Project. The body of the email was simple. Marcus, please confirm that the final transfer to Green Pastures LLC has been completed as per your instructions. The planting needs to happen this week. Green Pastures LLC. It sounded innocuous, like a landscaping company. But when I ran the name through the corporate databases Jack had access to, I found it. It was a shell company, registered just 6 weeks prior. And the sole registered agent of Green Pastures LLC? A woman named Valerie Finney, the planning commissioner's wife. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The payoff. The garden project was the bribe. The planting was the money. I now had the crime, the cover-up, and the money trail. I had enough to bury them all. But I didn't want to just give it to the FBI. That was too clean, too impersonal. I wanted to be the one to deliver the final blow. I wanted to see the look on their faces when their world came crashing down. The final phase of my plan was about retribution, not just justice. I wanted them to feel the same public humiliation and powerlessness that they had inflicted on me. First, I prepared 2 packages. The first package was for the media. I put together a slick, professional-looking portfolio. It contained the suppressed environmental report, the incorporation documents for Green Pastures LLC linking it to the planning commissioner's wife, and the bank transfer records showing a payment of $2 million from one of Thorne's offshore accounts to Green Pastures. I also included a selection of the most tastefully damning photos of Marcus and Jessica, enough to establish the affair without being gratuitous. I wrote a cover letter, posing as a disillusioned former employee of Thorne & Associates, a whistleblower acting out of conscience. I sent this package to the top investigative reporters at every major news outlet in the city, time to be delivered on a Monday morning. The second package was for the federal authorities. It contained everything the media got, plus the entire mountain of evidence I had on Thorne's larger tax evasion and securities fraud schemes. This was the kill shot, designed to ensure he wouldn't just be humiliated, he'd be imprisoned. But before I sent those packages, I had one last move to make. I wanted to orchestrate their downfall, to be the master of their fate, just as Thorne had been of mine. Thorne & Associates was about to hold its quarterly shareholder meeting. It was a major event, a chance for Marcus to stand before his investors and paint a rosy picture of the future, a future built on the corrupt riverfront deal. It was scheduled to be live-streamed. It was the perfect stage. On the Friday before the meeting, I used a burner phone to call Jessica. She answered, her voice wary. "Who is this?" "It's a friend, Jessica," I said, using a voice-altering device. "A friend who knows about Green Pastures LLC. A friend who knows about the $2 million garden project. I suggest you and Marcus take a look at your morning papers on Monday. It's going to be a big day for you." I hung up. The seed of panic was planted. I knew what would happen. She would go to Marcus. They would spend the weekend in a frantic, paranoid frenzy, trying to figure out who knew what, trying to cover their tracks. But it was too late. The dominoes were already falling. Monday morning, the story broke. It was a firestorm. Thorne's riverfront deal a toxic scam. CEO implicated in bribery and affair, screamed the headlines. The news played the story on a loop, showing pictures of Marcus and Jessica, the details of the suppressed report, the shell company. The city was in an uproar. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Incredibly, they didn't cancel it. Thorne's arrogance wouldn't allow him to. He had to project strength to face down the accusations. He and Jessica walked into that meeting like two people walking to their own execution. The live stream began. Marcus stood at the podium, his face a pale, sweaty mask of forced confidence. He tried to dismiss the reports as baseless attacks by our competitors. Jessica sat in the front row, trying to look supportive, but her eyes were wide with terror. And as Marcus was in the middle of a sentence about corporate integrity, it happened. The doors to the auditorium burst open. A team of FBI agents strode down the aisle. The live stream captured it all. The look of utter disbelief on Thorne's face. The gasp from the crowd. An agent walked up to the podium and said, clearly for the microphones to hear, "Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for bribery, securities fraud, and conspiracy." They cuffed him right there on the stage. As they led him away, his eyes scanned the crowd, a wild, desperate look on his face. And for a second, I'd swear his eyes met the cameras, and he knew. He knew this wasn't a competitor. This was personal. Jessica just sat there, frozen, as the world she had betrayed me for crumbled into dust on live television. The aftermath was everything I had planned and more. Marcus Thorne, denied bail as a flight risk, saw his corporate empire dismantled. The company filed for bankruptcy. His name, once a symbol of power, became synonymous with corruption. He was eventually sentenced to 25 years in a federal prison, a life sentence for a man his age. He would die in a cage. The corrupt planning commissioner was arrested, his career and reputation destroyed. Councilwoman Flores became a city hero, leading the charge to reform the system. And Jessica? Her fate was, in many ways, the cruelest. She wasn't arrested. Her crimes were moral and financial, cleverly shielded by Thorne. But she was utterly ruined. Fired in disgrace, she was a social pariah. Her friends vanished. Her family, after I sent them their own copy of the evidence, including details of how she'd conspired to steal my house, disowned her. She had no money. Her name wasn't on Thorne's frozen assets. She had no job, no connections, no home. I heard through Jack that she lost the house, my house, in the bankruptcy proceedings. It was seized by the bank. She was last seen working as a cashier at a discount grocery store, her face lined with a bitterness that had aged her 20 years. She was a ghost, haunting the ruins of a life she had stolen, only to have it blow up in her face. A few months after it was all over, I was sitting in a small, clean apartment I had rented, a place that was truly mine. I was working with Jack, building a legitimate forensic accounting arm for his business. It was quiet, honest work. I was at peace. One day, Jack tossed a newspaper on my desk. There was a small article on an inside page. A homeless man, a former CEO, had been found dead of exposure in a downtown alleyway. He'd been released from prison early on compassionate grounds due to a terminal illness. No one had claimed the body. It was Marcus Thorne. I looked at the picture of the once powerful man, now just a tragic, pathetic footnote. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just a quiet finality. The books were balanced. The debt was paid. I picked up my coffee, turned the page, and started my day. The ghosts were finally gone.